crisis scenario in India. That is, after liberalization and globalization, what happened in India regarding higher education? By global standards, India is doing fairly well. It runs the third largest higher educational system and has the third largest pool of skilled person power in the world, despite the fact that only 7.2% of the youth in the 17 to 23 age group have access to their higher education. The government is neither able nor willing to start new post-secondary education institutions to meet the target of providing access to at least 10% of the populace by the end of the 10th five-year plan. If India is to be amongst the category of the developed countries, it must provide access to higher education and technological skills for at least 20% of the youth in the relevant age group by 2020. In order to achieve this ambitious goal, the government in India has no other option but to rope in the private sector and private investment in higher education in a big way. The government share of higher education cannot be enlarged substantially in view of competitive pressures on the economy in the wake of structural adjustment programs. Realistically speaking, this is primarily because of mounting debts rather than ideological overtones, as India already had a debt of uh, uh, 12 million US dollars in 2003 itself. Although public expenditure on higher education has been augmented to rupees 2,712 crore and on technical education rupees 733.40 crore for 2005 to 2006. It is not sufficient in terms of unit cost per student. Since 2003, the government of India started 2% of assess, a special tax on all trading just to generate additional resources for education. But this amount cannot be used for higher education. It is earmarked only for primary education, which is a constitutional obligation for all governments in India, whether leftist, rightist, or coalition government. Every year, so many Indian students join private colleges, whether recognized and unrecognized, primarily because most of them are either unable to find a place in reputable public universities or are unable to get into the subject of their choice due to very tough and highly competitive India-wide entrance exams. Many hundreds or thousands leave the country every year to study abroad, even if it means studying at exorbitantly costly private higher education institutions or poorly rated public universities. Indians form the largest group of foreign students in USA, followed by Chinese and South Koreans, though there are some reports of a decline in their numbers in recent years. India can save a lot of resources and perhaps also generate additional resources by encouraging both for profit and non state actors in foreign collaboration to provide quality education in India itself. It can also take advantage of virtual, online, and distance education, particularly given its strength in terms of the largest technology. Even the government and UGC in India are no longer averse to private higher education, and social consensus is also in favor of a private education in general. In August 1995, the government of India came out with a private universities establishment and regulation bill in Rajya Sabha. Resistance from the private sector itself, opposition to huge endowment funds, to guarantees of free tuition for a fixed number of students, that is approximately 30% of students. They are intending to give it special tuition to 30% of the students, and to regulation by governments prevented the bill's passage. However, the central government has yet to pass legislation on private higher education in its attempt to avoid too many controversies and legal hassles. It needs to define clearly what is implied by the term private, what is implied by the term public, and what is meant by government aided institutions. There is a much difference between government aided institution and self financed higher education. It also needs to clarify the concept of charity, though for profit private higher education is still a taboo. Most private higher education institutions working in the name of charity are actually making huge profits through dubious means. Though the national government has not passed as yet an act facilitating or regulating private colleges and universities in India, many state governments have already passed the Private Universities Establishment and Maintenance Acts. For instance, the state of Uttar Pradesh, Uttaranchal, Chhattisgarh, etc. Some of the states in the southern and western parts of India took advantage of their Christian population and a tradition of English as the medium of instruction at the secondary level. They were the first to set up private colleges in the name of minorities to accommodate those students who could financially afford professional education but failed to get admission into public universities on the basis of merit or open competition. Most private colleges and universities cater to short-term market needs in terms of courses of study, whereas the mainstay in public universities remain in arts, science, and commerce. Of late, we find some decline in enrollments in pure sciences but a rise in management courses. The vast majority of students enroll in private, professional, and job oriented courses. In the beginning of 20th century, the Ministry of Human Resource Development set up a core setup of 6 members to look at the popularity of private medical and engineering colleges in some states. Experts from the private sector and prestigious institutions were solicited for their views and recommendations on various issues relating to the private initiatives in higher education in India. The Federation of Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry was also part of this core group on the issues of private higher education institutions for universities and the prospects of marketing Indian education abroad. There was consensus on the following points. There is an urgent need for the private sector to be enabled to operate in the education field in a major way. The high quality of the education system and the necessity of adapting to changes speedily must be emphasized. Concrete efforts should be made to attract foreign students to study in India. Similarly, Indian education institutions, universities, and centers of higher learning should be allowed to operate in other countries. Foreign institutions and universities should be allowed to operate in India in a transparent manner. Proper guidelines should be made available for the students and their parents when choosing a university. Private institutions should be given flexibility in terms of pricing, adequate resources to be able to operate without depending on government funding. Rules and regulations should be framed or changed to ease the private sector's participation into higher education. Some regulatory devices should be enforced to ensure quality of education and to restrain the commercialization or commodification of education by for profit organizations and institutions. A special task force was also constituted under the Prime Minister's Council on Trade and Industry to explore private investment in education, health, and rural development. This task force submitted a report known as Ambani Birla Report. This group advocates a fundamental change in terms of looking at education as common development and promotes education that is more adaptive, competitive, and technology oriented. They envisage a knowledge based economy and revolution through using cyber age education and the internet for the .com generations. They envisage huge potential for growth and development in a country like India, which has a population of 1 billion people, comprising 1/6 of humanity. They are in favor of granting operational freedom and flexibility to financial institutions to be able to invest in private higher education and of doing away with excessive regulations and rigid teaching traditions. As an emerging economy, India needs higher education to be able to grow in several directions. In addition, so skilled person power, it needs sound intellectual capital. It needs men and women well equipped in terms of knowledge and technological skills to deal with the challenges posed by globalization and the information revolution. It is an enormous task to educate the youth and to train the youth in the relevant age group in a country with a population over 1 billion. It is beyond the reach of the government and beyond the reach of the private sector. There is no other alternative but to forge a partnership between public and private, national and international institutions engaged in the business of higher education. It is a tedious job requiring highly qualified faculties, technical facilities, and staff. Though delivering higher education through the latest technology and distance education can be cost effective for the long run, it requires huge resources in the initial stages. These are the problem faced by higher education in India.